Hello, everyone. Welcome. Again, thanks for putting your names where you're from in the chat, and if you've attended any of our previous conversations. And like I said, nice to see people from all over, as well as quite a few new people that haven't. This is their first time attending, as well as some who have attended previous conversations. Oh, also, if you could mute yourself, please, so that I'm getting some echoes. So, or maybe Susie can mute everyone. I don't know if that's something that can be. Okay, there we go.
Hi,
I'm
muted
Bill.
all.
You muted all. Great, thanks. Yes, welcome everyone. I'm Bill Lyons, president of the Ohio Community Rights Community Rights Network. Sorry, and this is our sixth community conversation. We're really looking forward to our discussion, and we've got two of our board members with us, and this one is on social permaculture and urban eco-villages. And so with us, we've got Susan Vanderhoor and we've got Jim Shank. So what we'll do, let me just say a few words, that we're going to have and send out an invitation for all those who've attended our past conversations and this one. We're going to have a collective conversation to talk more broadly about common themes and what you've got out of our previous conversations and this one too, when it's done in February. So on February 26th at 6 p.m., we're planning to have a collective conversation, and I hope that you'll be able to join us for that. You'll be getting an invitation about that later. Please put any questions in the chat, and we will try to get to those, or as many as we can. So what we'll do is we'll have Susan present first, roughly about 20 or so minutes. Then if there's some questions immediately thereafter, we'll take a few of those and we'll have Jim present, and then we'll take questions for both at the end. And also, you can find out, if you haven't explored our website, OHCRN.org has the previous community conversations, also with the invitation for the collective community conversation in February. We'll be sending you a summary of the past conversations. They're just short summaries there. So if you, in case you missed it, or you attended and you tried to recall what was it about, we'll have a little summary there for that. Let me start then with Susan. She is one of our board members in Cincinnati. In fact, they're both, Susan and Jim are both in Cincinnati, and they have worked on the Ohio River Bill of Rights, also down in Cincinnati. And Susan is also the director of the Cincinnati Permaculture Institute. So Susan, take it away.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to open with a land acknowledgement that I've learned is appropriate. When we gather, we should honor the people and the land, recognize the injustices, and commit to actionable reconciliation. We learned this from the Cincinnati Native American Coalition. And we acknowledge with gratitude that we gather together on the traditional territories of the Shawnee, Miami, Ottawa, Wyandot, Delaware, and other indigenous peoples. This territory is covered by the Treaty of Greenville of 1795, an agreement with the indigenous peoples of Ohio to peaceably share and care for these lands, though the state of Ohio recognizes no indigenous. Today, Ohio is home to many indigenous people from across Turtle Island, including survivors and intergenerational family members who have been impacted by the legacy of the land seizures, colonial policies, and the school system. We honor them and we stand committed to be partners in healing, reconciliation, and justice. And perhaps most importantly, we aspire to uphold our human responsibility to the natural world by their example. So thank you for sharing that with me. So yeah, the community conversations were going on with individuals from across Ohio, talking about, their challenges, their struggles. And we saw this conversation, what is the nature of community? What's the community of nature, as a way to start looking at solutions. And that's what permaculture is all about. When I came to permaculture, I started seeing solutions everywhere. It was a world of problems for my 40 years of my adult life, being an environmental activist, working as an environmental researcher, working at the US EPA, and banging my head against the wall in a lot of ways. But now I have a new vision, and I appreciate permaculture for that. That's me in my class back in 2011. And my teacher right next to me, Doug, on my permaculture journey, beginning that. So what is permaculture? Conscious ecological design. That's a very short definition of permaculture. It brings us eco-literacy. It helps put us back into that world where we're connected, right? To take our responsibility as a keystone species very seriously and find solutions which exist in the natural world. And one of the Bill Mollison isms, we'll see in a minute. Bill Mollison was the founder of permaculture. I'm going to go through these first slides pretty quickly because it's just an introduction to what permaculture is, in case you're unfamiliar. But Bill Mollison liked to say the problem is the solution. It's how we ask the question that's going to get us to the answer. And it's this practice of ethics and principles and design methodologies so that we can create holistic systems. We create ecosystems out of our human-built systems, and that encompasses any number of things. Permaculture is very knowledgeable and has the homesteading down really well. So food production, sustainability, but our buildings and our artwork and our health and our entrepreneurship. So the principles, the ethics are at the center: earth care, people care, and fair share. Returning the surplus is an ethic of permaculture, and it encompasses all facets of our lives. And we're like a bee buzzing around the flower, right? Lighting on, bringing this enlightenment to all our everything we do. So, and here they are, the founders, Bill Mollison, David Holmgren. The story goes they went into almost reclusion for 3 years and pounded out their landmark publication, Permaculture One. But we stand on the shoulders of giants. Their work came from yeomans and the One Straw Revolution from the Japanese farmer. So if you're into reading, these are all great references. J. Russell Smith was an American talking about tree crops, because I always say trees put the permanent in permaculture. So the word refers to a permanent agriculture. And with all these relevant things that it can apply to, it's permanent culture. It became very quickly permanent culture, or the root words. So one of the lessons, a foundational lesson of permaculture, a foundational principle, is to follow the patterns. The principle tells us design from patterns to details. Look at what's happening, then figure out how to get your goals into place. And a pattern in nature is just a result of energy usage. And here's some images of familiar patterns, right? but we look like, how does nature distribute things? Through a branching pattern. How do we maximize edge? Through folding. How do we compact and strengthen, with spirals? So we're learning from the patterns of nature. And of course, humans have patterns. And patterns occur in time and our habits and our needs. And we have systemic processes that fall to a pattern. So observe and interact, another principle. Observe the pattern and then design with the wise information. You're being informed and you're assessing how energy is being used. So this applies to human patterns too, as we shall see. So I'm going to talk about social permaculture. We refer to permaculture calls all these social facets invisible structures. So we can talk about, our social orders, our communities, our financial systems, our economic systems, our law, our governance, voting. We could education, healthcare. This can apply to many invisible structures. And this just gives a brief example of how we might look at some of our invisible structures through the ethics and principles of permaculture, social organizations being inclusive and our communities being intentional, and cooperative currency is an example of a financial permaculture. And Sky Miles is an example of cooperative currency. So anyway, it goes on and on. Ranked choice voting. I always say the real winner in 2016 was ranked choice voting, because some states actually fell to that at last. So anyway, just an overview of what the invisible structures are. So again, the books, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Most of the information I'm going to share with you henceforth is from Adam Brock and his book, Change Here Now. You can't even see the subtitle, Permaculture Solutions for Personal and Community Transformation. And he is very transformative. He is an organization, Regenerate Change, and you can find them on the web. Of course, when I read his book, I see his reference to Christopher Alexander, the architect, who revealed, over 200 patterns in his pattern language about the built human structures, cities, towns. Anyway, so if for all you book lovers out there, this is where the information is coming from. So Adam Brock starts out his book saying that to follow along, you must accept a basic premises of permaculture and what he's exploring. And these three premises are certainly something that I fully adhere to. Humans are nature, and nature is abundant. Nature gives and endlessly, and our economy and our socioeconomic dictums tell us that, things are scarce and competition thrives, and that's actually not true. Nature is abundant. Our current socioeconomic system is unsustainable, right? Because we're basing it on scarcity, for one thing. And we believe, permaculturists, that permaculture can give conceptual tools to transcend these challenges, that it is possible to create eco-friendly 21st century communities. Because we created the situations we have, we can create something different. We absolutely can. And I couldn't get out of bed in the morning if I didn't believe that. Okay, so I'm going to go through some patterns tonight. We're looking at patterns that have worked in social situations. And these are some overarching patterns here. And I'm going to hone in on three of them. But the ones in blue, I say, are kind of relevant to our rights of nature work. And the ones that are highlighted in pink, that I put in pink, are relevant to the community rights work. It's just kind of an arbitrary way to separate them, but henceforth, that's how I'm looking at them. So the number one inspiring pattern of the natural world that really is relative to our social structures is looking at the long game. We've got to look. Earth has life on Earth, 500 million years, right? That's the e to the eighth exponent, right? 500 million years of life. It's a long game. And the first people have that 7 generations philosophy, right? We have to think about what our actions, how that will impact, the great great grandson of the great great granddaughter, right? So we got to think this is a long game. All of us here, we have to know that we're not going to see the great result. It's a long arc of history, but it's pointing toward justice. And we may not live to see some of the best things that we're planting today, right? Plant the tree that 20 years ago or what, anyway. So biophilia is another pattern that we have to adhere to get peace on this earth, right? That we are nature, we're part of nature. We have to feel that sense of belonging to something greater than ourselves, and that is pretty much foundational in probably all our work, I would say, here tonight. I'm going to talk more about interdependent communities because I think that's a really interesting one. We have to think about the right size. Humanity, thanks to medicine, agriculture, a number of things, we have defied our limits as a species. And we got to start thinking more about the right size of things because nature has carrying capacities for organisms, and we need to learn from that. I'm going to talk more about relationship zones. I'm sure you're all very familiar with your work to dethrone anti-markets, right? And because they're anti-community. The powers that be, the global systems, are not the fair market that we had been promised in our textbook as children, or even so that's a process that is inspiring a lot of great work. I'm going to talk more about commoning. I'm sure you're familiar with the commons and how that is a pattern for restoration and sustainable communities. There's this subsidiarity, which is like a bottom up, where the power goes to the smallest scale. It's another great pattern. And then zones of autonomy, places where we can practice, all our best, put all our best practices into place where we're not, it can be a testing ground, it can be a refuge. And Jim later will talk about his eco-village experience. So eco-villages is a type of zone of autonomy. They say college is a zone of autonomy, where you get to live in this adult world, but you don't have the responsibilities. So, these patterns are far reaching. But we keep them in mind because they're going to really be directional for this lasting change that we're looking for. So I'm going to talk about interdependent communities, and this is just a photograph from Adam's book and illustrating for all you visual folks how the more interconnections you have with individuals, or even with groups and with between groups, the more interdependency you have, the more diversity you have, the stronger your community is going to be. And it's a modern irony that as we increase our global connections, we're losing connection to the people right next door to us. But how do we build an interdependent community? And Brock makes the point that we don't really have to even get along with people to be in a community with them. We just have to need each other. That's what makes us interdependent. And that exists in some of our systems already. Obviously, I need my banker, I need my money. I don't really know how to use my money without the bank. I've never been able to figure that one out. So I'm dependent, and ultimately the bank's dependent on, depositors. So cooperatives is a great example of interdependent communities. We have the Cincy Tool Bank in Cincinnati, and you don't have to own that tiller. You can just, you know, check it out. Like you check out a library book. A library is a cooperative, right? And let's see, there's this group now working for the Sustainability Central location in Cincinnati, which is going to be a hub for many nonprofits, for storage, for classroom space, for their activities, to have demonstration sites, to have any number of educational experiences in a shared community. So we want to think more about how we can build these connections, how we can come to need each other. And that's what's going to make us strong. Okay. Moving on to relationship zones. So if you watched the video ahead of time, that's what she spoke on. This Regenerate Change video talked about how we glean patterns from nature and we can build our sustainable systems around the pattern of nature. And she talked about that heartwood and those rings of the tree being a strong reminder and a strong pattern, that, yourself being at the center, you need to be strong. We need to be the change we want to see, right? And so you want to keep being self-aware, and we can use a lot of permaculture principles to examine ourselves and our patterns. And so there's a lot of different ways this, tree rings pattern can express relationships, and express patterns and planning for all kinds of, human-built systems, transportation, finance, food production. And just think about the larger group. In permaculture, we talk about zoning, using the zoning design principle to put things in close proximity to each other for efficient energy use. So as the tree gets larger, as the culture expands and gets larger, more and more people are, involved in each zone of these relationships. So your very intimate zone, your zone 1 would be the people closest to you, who you live with, your family. And then there's the next zone of a group that you're involved with where you have trust. This is your tribe. And Brock says this is where the social alchemy happens. That, the small group of, people that are going to change the world, that's where it happens. And we can have cooperation up to 100 people. You can have reciprocity up to 150 people. He says that above 1,500 people, we can't even recognize that many faces, that the human brain can't even recognize that. So this kind of distrust starts to happen when we get to groups larger than that. So this is where we go back to our small interdependent groups, our smaller organizations that are working in tight relationship connection with each other. And you can learn a lot more at the Regenerate Change website. So the last one I want to tease out is commoning. I'm sure you're very familiar with the concept of the commons, which began to fall away as early as the Renaissance, when the economic system created the debt system and everything became commodified. And another author, Boyer, talks about the transactionist role we play. He calls us Homo economicus. Do we want to be more than that, right? Do we want to find value beyond the transaction, beyond the financial value? And Eleanor Ostrom in 2006 actually won the Nobel Peace Prize. She was in economics. She was the first woman economist to win a Nobel Peace Prize because she studied commons around the world and found out, yeah, commons work. And, some of the naysayers about why commons aren't going to work, you can't trust each other, there were checks and balances in these systems. So anyway, more on commons. I really enjoy thinking about this because, to understand the commons, we have to realize that there are more types of wealth than just financial. Financial wealth, finance is just a medium for exchange. We can exchange other things, and without that financial medium, we have, of course, the commons, our natural environment, the air, the water, all the life on Earth. This is a shared wealth. And we have buildings, infrastructures, there's possessions, our material possessions, our experiences, the disciplines we've studied, our crafts, our, skills. This is a type of wealth, right? There's our meaningful relationships, our status in the community. That is a social wealth. And of course, our cultural stories, songs, art, our food, everything that we enjoy and celebrate, that is wealth. And, of course, our spiritual well-being, our intellectual, our knowledge, creativity. We have to recognize our own creativity as a great source of wealth and renewable. These are, many of these are renewable sources of wealth. So I enjoy thinking about that when I get down about the anti-markets. So the last thing I'm gonna talk about here, essentially, when it comes to like the social permaculture work, this is more Adam Brock. He identifies, there are many patterns and examples he gives in this book. If you want to explore this more, I really recommend Change Here Now, because he has, social justice movements, everything exemplified in the book. And he talks about human polycultures when you're working. He says, your most effective group work is really just about 11 people that are really with each other intimately doing the grunt work. Sure, social justice movements are large, but when you're planning your event, you're in a group with your tribe. And so the idea of polyculture is from the Earth's principle of diversity. Diversity is health in any living system. And permaculture talks about polycultures like the food forest or a guild of plants that get along with each other. Well, our human polycultures, we can see our different talents, our different skills, because diversity isn't just age or sex or race. It is talent and interest. And he hones in on, this isn't even all of them, I think there's 10 of them, but he talks about looking at, and each one of these images on this page is one of these human skills, or the iconic power that each individual brings to the group. So elders have experience, radicals have vision. There's the graces that keep your internal energy intact, like our Miss Ruth, who brings snacks to our meeting. She's our grace for sure. And then there's the weavers that are making the connections, that are saying, you need to talk to this person. And so the more people we have, the more talents we have, the more room for connections. And that's what the image is showing us. We need translators to bridge the gap between people that think they aren't speaking the same language, to get them on the same page. There's people that just got to do the work, the helping hands. Mavens are specialists. We need tech people, right? We need we need carpenters. So, and then the servant leader is a beautiful archetype. That's what the prism here is, a triangle with the prism, where they're incorporating, all of the energy and helping others, to be the light. So I think this is very helpful when, if you're looking where to go in your group and you recognize the talents of these individuals, how that can be best optimized, and how, the relationships can build and thrive from there. So what are the qualities for a resilient design? It's renewable. There's many connections of elements and functions. That's a principle of permaculture. We want reciprocal relationships, because that's the renewability, right? It needs to be adaptable, and it's going to always improve. So now we're assessing our design. Is it resilient? Is it improving? Are we maximizing our yield? We're not burning out. The total is greater than the sum of the parts, right? That emergent property. So these are things to keep in mind when you're designing your system, or you're looking at your organization or your project. Ask yourself these questions and maybe use some of these patterns to help refine or retool. I want to remind us all the words of Eckhart Tolle, that we are not just people. We are the universe becoming conscious of itself. We are magnificent beings. If we can imagine it, we can create it. We are the hands of God. We are the divine manifesting. We are manifesting. Abstract thought is directing evolution now with, genetically modified organisms. Let's bring this thing that we want. Let's find our common ground and work together and be all we can be. Okay, I'm just going to end by talking about my organization, Cincinnati Permaculture Institute. We run permaculture design certification courses. We run workshops, and lunch and learn sessions are coming up in the spring. Our Wake Up Winter PDC is now enrolling. It's a 5-weekend program in March, and you go to our website if you want to check us out. We have the Growing Value Nursery, nearly 200 varieties of edible perennials, which help us, walk the talk of planting food forests. We've had a big project of installing food forests and forage gardens in Cincinnati this year. We got a couple grants from the city that helped us plant, 20 different food forest spaces. So, and we're always looking to outreach, to collaborate, to celebrate with you. We have this wonderful Maven, who is our marketing director, Felix, and she puts out our monthly newsletter, sometimes more often, and we include the inputs and outputs where we're sharing information. This is what I need, or this is what I'm offering. So any work that you're doing that falls in line with our work, we'd be happy to share that to we're getting on the, what am I trying to say, a listserv of, close to 2,000 people. So if you have information you'd like for us to share with that community, we're open to that. You can email me, info@cincinnatipermacultureinstitute.org. And that's it. That's all my slides. I know there may be questions. I always go too fast. So I'm sure I blew right past something that warranted a lot more discussion.
Yeah, thanks so much, Susan. Yeah, if anybody has a couple questions, we could take a couple of them. I suppose you can either type them in or unmute yourself if you want to ask it, but we ask it to be brief because then we've got another presentation here, Jim, and then we'll take more questions at the end. So are there any questions at the moment that anybody would like to ask? Okay, well, if not, then keep thinking, and you can ask them at the end. So I'll let Susan say a few words about Jim, who's also one of our Ohio Community Rights Board members.
Hey, Jim's one of our elders. He holds the knowledge and the experience. I've been the mentor of mine for many, many years. He doesn't even remember meeting me when I was in high school, but he's founded many wonderful programs that went on to have lives of their own here in Cincinnati. And he's going to talk to you about the Eco Village and his experience in connecting with the natural and human world there. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, Jim, if you would like to share your screen, I know you have a presentation, you can go ahead and do that, and then we'll get started. Great.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Jim Shank. I started an organization called Imago back in 1978, and it's an ecological education organization. And all through the years, we sort of asked the question, well, how do we walk this talk? And so over the years, we have been on Enright Avenue most of the time. And so we worked a lot less with the people on Enright. We had kids doing recycling before the city started doing recycling. But then eventually we decided that the best way we could walk our talk was by developing an eco village. So we created Enright Ridge Urban Eco Village. And basically it experienced oneness with nature in the heart of the city. And I think that Susan talked about the whole thing of we are part of nature and we don't own nature, et cetera. So this is really a really important thing. And this is our brochure. Okay. How do I get moved? But to start with, our problem is that our current paradigm is our problem. And our paradigm is that economics is primary. And humans are simply producers and consumers, and the earth is purely a resource. And humans being purely consumers and producers, we can say that we don't let humans interfere with profits because economics is what's really important. So if we kill a few people for profit, that's okay. The fossil fuels, cigarettes, polluting the drinking water, nuclear disaster, all these things have led to, people dying. And the young man who killed the CEO of an insurance company, he's going to end up in jail. But that CEO, before he died, probably killed quite a few people by not allowing them to be insured. But he would never have been held responsible because he was doing it in the name of profit. And seeing the earth as purely a resource, we end up with climate change, which is causing an immense ecological damage, hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, et cetera, et cetera. And we ourselves are moving into being Tornado Alley, which has been south of us, but it's moving forward because of climate change. But with all this, I do have hope, and it lies in moving towards reality. And the reality is that the earth is primary. And we humans are one of 10 million species, roughly. And we do, as a species, economics, culture, spiritual, education, politics. That's what our species does. While other species do other things, that's our niche. And what it leads to is our question now, when you have an economic system, the questions we ask is, how much money does it cost me and how much will I make? You know, the whole economic issue, if you listen to the news, that's the primary story, is always deal with economics. But the question we're going to have to ask is, does my action enhance the earth? So whatever we do, you know, job-wise, you know, we're doing planning or economics, dealing with cities, agriculture. The question we're going to have to ask is, these things enhancing the earth? And for tonight, I need to ask the question, is what I'm doing here tonight enhancing the earth? I hope it is. But we need to ask that question with everything that we do. And we have to come to realize that we are earth. We don't own the earth. I mean, like saying we own the earth is like saying my little finger owns me. It makes absolutely no sense because we are earth. And the earth isn't here for us. And we are simply one of 10 million species. So as such, we, like most mammals, are a tribal animal. Community is part of our DNA. We really need community. We need other people around us. And the economic system loves individualism because that means everybody has to get their own stuff. And the reality is individualism doesn't exist. We are an interdependent people. And what this whole concept has led to is loneliness, isolation, and suicide, which right now is supposed to be at its highest level. And what we need to do is think globally and act locally. We need to function and I think that Susan was talking about the whole thing of working within our own communities, that when we try to work too large, it's beyond our comprehension. So the eco-village is what I want to talk about tonight as a community. An eco-village is a self-sustaining community aimed at developing alternative ecological, environmental, and social standards. The ultimate goal is to create an environment that can support itself in perpetuity. And right now, with the system that we have, which I say, you know, in essence, the economic system has worked. I mean, there's 8 billion of us, which is a sign of a successful species. But that system now is going to destroy us. And so we have to develop a new way of living. And I think that the whole view of community and economics is just really primary. And in simple terms, an eco-village is a community of people supporting each other and living a sustainable life. Or another way, we live together and work together to honor and enhance the amazing planet that we are blessed to be a part of. And being in the eco-village, when I go out of my house, I feel normal. And because the people around here, a lot of them believe the same way I do. In some neighborhoods, I would be considered pretty weird. And what is an urban retrofit at eco-village? It basically is looking at our communities within our cities. Right now, we have all these neighborhoods in our cities, And we need to stay in our cities. If we move out of the cities, we destroy the whole natural world that both we are dependent on in terms of agriculture and the rest of the species on our planet are dependent on. So we need to learn to live within our cities and live here ecologically. And so the urban retrofit eco-village is transforming an existing urban area, existing neighborhood, the neighborhood you live in, ecologically and sustainably. It involves retrofitting and reimagining existing buildings and infrastructure, but it's looking at what exists. And some aspects of the urban retrofit eco-village, it's in or near, obviously, an urban area, environmentally sustainability, social cohesion, fostering community. So the environment and community are top priorities. And then energy efficiency and renewable energy, resource sharing, biodiversity, and green space. So these are just some of the aspects of a retrofit eco-village. So some of the qualities of an urban eco-village: redeveloping urban core with ecological principles. Now, our cities have to become ecological. Respecting wildlife and ecosystems, which is all part of our cities. Reducing urban sprawl, which I just talked about, that we need to stay in the cities. And if we create cities that are very livable, people will stay. Not many people leave our eco-village. People really, because it's a really great place to live. Creates mutual support for sustainable living and builds diverse community. I tell people we have thousands and thousands of residents in Enright Ridge Urban Eco-Village. About 250 of them are human. And it's really important to see all of the plants and animals around us as part of our community. So some of the advantages of an urban eco-village: we have easy access to a lot of necessities that are present in the city. Buildings and neighborhoods already exist. There's a study been done that intentional community, the starting them, only about 10% of them succeed, because what they're trying to do is buy land, figure out the buildings, what they're going to look like, and then finding the funds to do it. And by the time that happens, most of them fall apart. And so that we don't have that. We're dealing with buildings that are already here. And we have access to public transportation and networking with nearby communities. We don't have to drive miles to communicate with other people. Now, some of the challenges: we have less control over membership. Rural communities, eco-villages, people move there, and so it becomes the center of their life. Here, people are already involved in a lot of different things, from their spiritual to work to play. And so getting people to focus on the eco-village is a challenge. Older buildings need retrofitting, which is harder to do than when you start from scratch. And caring for the land, dealing with pollution, those are things that the city is dealing with, and we don't have a lot of control over a lot of that. So this is our eco-village. It's in Price Hill, a neighborhood in Cincinnati. And the long street there, that's Enright Avenue. That's where we started. But we started because Imago was a center and really started the eco-village. And so we looked at the 4 streets contiguous to Imago, and the green land there, that's Imago land. And so there's Enright, there's a short street called Terry, and then McPherson, and Wells is the next street down. It's not, you can't see it on here. And we have just started a few years ago expanding onto Wells. So facts about our eco-village. We have about 108 buildings, about 119 households. About a third of the people are supportive of what we do. About a third are neutral. but open to the eco-village, and about a third are indifferent. But we encountered very little resistance because we really have changed this neighborhood, and people who live here are very aware of that. And even if they're not involved, they appreciate it and they tend to stay. The sides of our houses are south facing for solar gain. We're just 7 minutes from downtown Cincinnati. And we have 200 acres of woods and a historical cemetery surrounding us. And we have a supportive foundation that provided low interest, actually grants for housing. This foundation, they had money, but they realized they didn't have a lot. And so they could give away the interest every year, which wouldn't be too much, or they could give away interest and principal. But if they did that, eventually they would go out of business. So what he decided was that he would give a grant and for rehabbing houses. So we have 20 to 30 houses using him. And what we do is I contact him, and we bought those houses, and the only houses we buy are those that would not sell at market rate, that an investor would buy and turn into rental houses. So what we do is I would call him and say, Ed, I need $15,000 to buy this property. I need $60,000 to rehab it. And he would send me a check for $75,000. But then when we sold it, we would return the money to him plus 1 to 3% interest so that he could continue doing this. And it's been a real blessing. It really worked well. It was an ingenious idea. So our mission statement, Enright Ridge Urban Eco-Village seeks to be an ecological responsible community sharing ideas, resources, and a reverence for the earth. So our thing is that not only do we want to be an eco-village, we also want to share the ideas of the eco-village, which I'm doing tonight. So we started, Imago, as I said, was trying to figure out how to walk their talk. So I was a director of Imago for 28 years. And I basically I live on Enright Avenue, and I invited 25 of our neighbors, people who I realized had an interest in ecology, to set up an eco-village. And 17 residents showed up. And we did brainstorming, and we prioritized and decided on 5 things to start with based on our priorities and what people were interested in working on. So we developed a 1.5-mile walking trail around the street, planned street potlucks. We worked when a house came up for sale, we would work to see if we can find someone interested in the eco-village to buy the house. We planned the eco-village entryway. This flower pot here is at the entrance. And we had another one across the street. And then we did some other landscaping along the cemetery. We have a cemetery in our backyard. And then we designed the promotional brochure, which you saw at the beginning. And one of the things we wanted to do was let people know what we were doing. So they didn't have to question, what are they doing? So we put out a newsletter. We've been putting out a newsletter weekly since about monthly, except for a few times since 2005. And basically the newsletter would do educational kinds of stuff. We would talk about basically what's happening in the neighborhood, et cetera. Another thing we did, again, to involve people, we did a thing called appreciative inquiry, which is a neat planning technique. Most plans come and say, well, what are your problems and how do we fix them? Which is sort of a downer. Appreciative inquiry asks, what do you like about your neighborhood and how do we get more of it? Which is really an exciting approach. So we interviewed a good number of people in the eco-village. We had like 8 questions, and in the end, we compiled what we had and developed the committees that we formed. So that's basically our eco-village. And here are some practical ideas for starting an urban eco-village. And my guess is most of you live in a community, and if you want to start an eco-village, here are a few things. One is, number one, the eco-village isn't the only way. It is a way. Second, if you've got 2 or more other households of people who are interested in setting up an eco-village, you can start one. And the way to start it is actually start the conversation. On the street, invite people for coffee and listen to their ideas about what they feel they could do to make the neighborhood better. And talk about your own interests in ecology. And if you have enough interest in people, you can come together and you actually start. And if not, invite people to come and move into the neighborhood. So when they get there, you can then start your eco-village. And finally, I did write a book on creating an urban eco-village, a model for revitalizing our cities. And it's basically talks about what we're doing in the eco-village with aging, youth, and just all different aspects of the eco-village. But then it has a chapter on how to start an urban eco-village. So if you're interested in starting one, there you can find it probably in this book. And if anybody is interested and want to talk to me about it, I'd be more than willing to talk to you about setting up an eco-village. Thank you very much.
Oh, very inspiring, Jim. If you could stop sharing your screen and then we can see everyone. And yeah, so I hope we've enjoyed both of those. I did, and I hope the rest of you did. And we'll open it up. I know that it's just about an hour here, so maybe if there are questions, we can take a few, maybe 5-10 minutes, see how it goes. If anybody has some questions, please go ahead. You can either type them in or you can unmute yourself and ask Susan or Jim. Let me ask a question for Jim. Has it been hard to maintain the village there, or has it been exciting to see it grow and change over time? Or I imagine that some of it is like a little few steps forward, a few steps backwards, and then keep going. But I'd just like to know your perspective about that.
Yeah, I think one of the struggles is that we really have forgot how to live in community. And the whole individualism thing that we, are raised with is a real struggle. And so, yeah, we've had ups and downs, and there's a split at one time, and we're trying to pull it back together now. And so yeah, it's a challenge. It's work, but to me, it's really well worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I want to come visit.
You're more than welcome. If anybody wants to come visit, give me a holler.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we need to organize a field trip.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So there were 2 things on chat. One thing, Kathy Jones wondered if your slides would be available. That was one.
If you don't mind sharing them, we can send them out with our recording and everything with it.
Yes, Susie already has mine, so yeah.
Okay.
go for
I have your permission. Good.
Okay.
And
Okay
then,
with you, Jim?
props for myself.
then the other one was from Lynn Hamamoto. I know she's in Cincinnati. And I don't understand. She talked about retrofit makes common sense. And I don't know what AFTAB has the opposite plan about
He's the
connected
mayor.
communities.
He's
So
the
if you
mayor.
could talk, Lynn.
He's the mayor of Cincinnati, AFTAB.
Oh, okay.
Ah, okay. So she wondered if there were
Oh,
is other.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm on the phone and I can't control this. But yeah, AFTAB Mayor Purival, this is one of his real big showcase plans. It's under the mayor's name, but it's the corporate community that's really pushing this. And it's been done in other cities. So they say, oh, these other cities are a success, so we could do the same thing. But it's so artificial compared to what Jim's talking about. Thank you.
Okay, Greg has his hand up. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I remember Imago. I think I visited there about 12 or 13 years ago once, but I'm curious. I think about the psychology of the commons. I know Susan earlier was talking about the commons and stuff, and a lot of it's about our relationship, and the psychology of the commons to me is kind of a mess. We haven't figured out a way to, so a lot of different ways. It's to come together in commons-based solutions to things. And so, have you kind of from your eco village, have you kind of gleaned any good solid learning things of kind of evolving the relationship, the commons relationship in your village with the
Well,
people?
I think that Imago is really sort of that type of thing. There's 16 acres of land there, and anyone is welcome to go there. We use the building there a lot for meetings, etc. So it is sort of the commons in that regard. But the reality is that a lot of eco villages, people share houses and a community center, etc. We haven't done that. We did at one point. We had a pub that we were sharing together, but we don't have a building, just for the eco village. So, there's plus and minuses to that. But Imago, that land is just a huge, wonderful asset for us.
Okay,
Can I say something?
sure.
So Jim, talk about
Say
Terry
what?
Street Commons. Jim,
Oh,
talk about Terry, I mean, that's part of Imago land and that's being used probably the most community use on a regular basis, besides the building.
yeah, we have, people have set up this spot. There's a cob oven there. We do every other Saturday morning, we do a earth ritual there. And there's actually part of a community garden type thing there. So it's a neat little spot to get together at.
Yeah, go ahead. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Bill with Deborah here. We live on Enright, and we've been in this community over 30 years. I think our woods is approached like a commons. The woods that wraps around the backs of all the yards on this half-mile long dead-end street that Imago is mostly at the back part of the lots unfenced, even though it's technically on paper private property. All the parcels, they're unfenced. So the trail Jim mentioned earlier goes all the way around the 200 acres or so greenbelt essentially, and people can walk through all that land. And I think people see that basically it's more of a commons than it is all these parcels of private property.
Okay, thanks.
And it really is where we share a lot with the other species around us, which is really neat that we have that space.
Okay.
So
Any
in the
other-
chat, there's a question and then a comment. I'll go ahead unless Matthew from Youngstown wrote a question. So I don't know if he wants to speak up or I can do it. Let's see if I see him. Okay, so he wrote, regarding polyculture, what advice would you give to translators, the bridges, in the community to help them become more productive?
I'll let you take that one, Susan.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah. Thanks for, well, just this common accepted language, I think there's just seems to be inflammatory language anymore. Like people are poised for, battle almost, right? And so we gotta be careful ever increasingly how, you know, the vernacular that we fall into, like the language itself can be inflammatory, without intention, you know, that's one thing that comes to mind. People need an agreed language, like they need to agree on the definition of things. What did Jimmy Carter sat down, you know, I recognize your right to exist, you know. It might have to start out pretty basic, but yeah, always finding that common ground. That's the other thing. You know, something I don't know why it wasn't in my presentation. Another thing that permaculture talks about is working at that union of the edge, you know, meeting the edge. Permaculture talks about using the edge. So like where the common accepted social norm and what your vision of the world, you know, where those things intertwine, that's the edge of change. That's where you don't try to pull people from all the way the other side. You've got to find where you have something in common, work in that edge of change.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I see Patricia has a hand up, so go ahead, Patricia.
Okay, I'm just curious, what are the benefits? I mean, and I'm thinking about like a condo association or if you move into a condo and there's an association, you join the association and you get some benefits. You get your, you know, your sidewalks plowed and whatnot. Do people sign a contract to be part of your village? Are there any, what do I want to say? Not requirements, but are there any kind of expectations for people who live there? Are there any benefits other than, you know, surrounding yourself with most people that have similar mindsets?
Well, a lot of eco-villages do have that type of thing. And in the past, we've had a membership and there was some advantages. And we started off that anybody who was a member would be on the board and make up the board. That didn't work real well, but you know, it was that concept of how do we involve people. That's a struggle trying to figure that one out. How best to involve people in the neighborhood. You know, how do you know who's involved and not involved? And you know, in a retrofit eco-village in which, you know, as I said, about a third of people involved, a third are open, a third are indifferent, you know, working that out, you know, it's a struggle. It's one of the weaknesses, you know, of not having just people living here who are all a part of members of the eco-village.
But what about benefits, Jim, besides, you know, just being in, you know, in a place where nature is kind of a priority?
As I said, I think that that just walking up the street, you know, talking to people, you know, and a lot of the conversation deal with that type of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think that support is here. That's the real positive.
Well, can I say there's also a lot of sharing, like if there's something you need to borrow, you put it out to people. There's a listserv. We're looking at crisis resilience in the neighborhood, but there's a lot of sharing because we know each other. And just, you know, I assume this happened elsewhere, but with the recent snow, everyone's helping shovel each other out. So I think that social capital is really enhanced by knowing each other. A lot of people don't know each other in their neighborhoods. So I think we're really at an advantage to know each other.
Yeah, good point.
I agree.
I wanted to read a message in chat from Sharon Spruill, and she's with the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition, and we are an affiliate. They are an affiliate with us of Sobe Concerned Citizens in Youngstown, Ohio. We've been fighting to keep a tire burning plant out of the city, and we've made a relationship with the government. I mean, with the local government, which is great. And you know, and we're trying to build community. But she has a message here that's very interesting that the organization Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition is currently working with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, on a climate resilience regional challenge in which we are working with community-based organizations to understand the best strategies to protect against climate change. So, just a shout out, here we are connected on this conversation, and hopefully the, connection can continue. And certainly that diagram that you had, Susan, with the little dots and, some go to more than one place. But I mean, I think, we're all looking to build the community. I want to say from Jim's book, one of the greatest things, which we've had them here before, is the community supported agriculture, where not only the members of the eco village are able to, get food during the growing season, but also people from outside the eco village come into that. So I would highly recommend, reading the book if you're interested, and finding like-minded people in your community.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, any other last questions? I know we're going on, but it seems like we still have a lot of people who have stuck around, which is nice. Okay, well, on that note, thank Susan and Jim so much for the presentation. I found them very inspiring. I can see there's a lot of great comments. So all of you attended, again, thank you. And especially people who are returning or first time attending one of our community conversations. Like I said, you will get soon the recording and invitation for our collective community conversation with information of our past ones, summaries. And again, you can go to our OHCRN, which stands for CommunityRightsNetwork.org website, and find more about all the conversations and other things that we do as well. So you can either listen to the recordings and watch them, or we will be sending out summaries. Susie just put the link in the chat to our website. So look forward to seeing you on February 26th, which will be the last Wednesday of the month at same time, 6 o'clock. And we want to have a collective conversation about our past presentations and common interest ideas, and about, with all of you, continuing the conversation. And we want you to be involved in that too. So we look forward to that, and I hope you will join us there. So thanks so much, and please look out for our emails coming soon. Thanks, everybody, and take care.
Thank you.
You.